Good afternoon, everybody. Happy tax day here in the United States. Just realized that it's tax day today. Just thought I'd have a Saturday live stream. Why? Why not have a Saturday live stream since I missed my Wednesday live stream from a faculty meeting? You know, when you have faculty meetings, you got to do what you got to do. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a guest on today. We're going to talk about breeding catfish. Primary lower carrot catfish and some oddball catfish, since we have an oddball person coming up. So the speaker today is Dr. Eric Thomas. Eric is a professor of biology at University of Pacific. He spent the last couple of summers at the Amazon Research Center in Peru doing his work on catfish cell poisoning. So I just have a few slides of showing Eric in his first time in the water. Not the most graceful entrance into the first time he collected fish. He kind of used his back end to slide into the water, and then when he was there, he got stuck. So these are hazards of being a fish biologist. So with that, just note, if you have questions, please put your questions in chat, and we'll hopefully get to it. And so we're just going to basically have a Q&A. And so Eric's going to tell us about his experiences with the different catfishes he has bred over the last few years. Especially in COVID. I guess he was Mr. Catfish Breeder. He was known for his spawns in COVID. So he had a good COVID while most of us didn't have a good COVID. So with that, Eric, you may also want to mention something that's happening at your local club.
Well, thank you, Anthony, and thank you, everybody, for joining us. So I'm with the Sacramento Aquarium Society in Sacramento, California, and on June 3rd and 4th, we are having our first fin dig event. It's a 2-day event. We haven't had one. Well, it's our first one in about 2 decades. We haven't had one since the early or mid-2000s. And this one will be a 2-day event. We're going to have 5 speakers on Saturday, including Dick Au, who's known around the world for breeding discus and other fish, Pam Chin, Jerry Liang, Eric Lucas, and Chuck Rambo. Then on Sunday, we're going to have Joey, the king of DIY, as our speaker. And we are also going to follow Joey's presentation with a big auction that'll probably last about 6 hours. But I'd also like to say that if you come on Saturday, we're going to have a charity-based rare fish auction. And I don't mean all the fish will be rare, like endangered rare, but they're not common in the hobby. They'll be high-value fishes. And all the money from that auction will go to some kind of fish charity, whether conservation or some other nonprofit endeavor. So that's our plan. We'll have raffles on Saturday and Sunday. Saturday is $25 for the whole day. It's at the Lionsgate Hotel in Sacramento along Highway 80. It's only $25 to attend the event. The hotel's giving a special rate, not $25, but a special rate on the night if you want to stay the night in the hotel. So I hope you guys can join us. It'll be really, really a good weekend. I'm looking forward to it.
So just so you know, we have Fernando Chupiando visiting us today on our live stream from Peru. He says, "Wahoo!"
Hola, Fernando. I just exhausted my Spanish.
Yeah, okay, that's it. That's that's 2 more words than I knew that I know. So "o" and "la" is 2 words in my book.
All right.
So yeah, so it should be a good event. It's for those of you who know or who went to Fishtoberfest, it'll be in that same vein as Fishtoberfest. You'll have vendors there, correct?
Yes, there's going to be a vendor room. There's going to be a number of different vendors, both I think commercial vendors, some local stores, and local breeders bringing their fish, their plants, their wares, etc. And as I said, $25 for the whole weekend. Sunday is free if you only come on Sunday for Joey and the auction, but you don't get to participate in the auction, the rare fish auction on Saturday, if you don't show up Saturday. So please come to both days if you can. We haven't had a 2-day event, like I said, in almost 20 years, so we're really excited about it.
So Fernando says Dr. Micropenis. Oh, I'm sorry, Microglanus.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Microglanus.
That must be Spanish. That must be more Spanish.
That was Spanish. Yeah. So yeah. So let's get into some catfish. Let's first talk about your experiences with plecos. I mean, plecos are found throughout the Amazon. There's cold water plecos down in the southern part of South America. There's warm water found in the Amazon. So most of your breeding has been on what type of plecos?
So my first pleco that I ever bred was this little clown pleco, Pinaculus, either Macus, or there's a L number that's similar. And I'm not actually sure which one I had, but it was one of those Pinaculus, a little clown pleco. I had a group of 6 adults in a 15-gallon aquarium with some bamboo pipe that I cut into caves and had closed at one end. And they just went bonkers breeding. And after that, I discovered, hey, I can breed plecos. And from there, I went to L397. Well, actually, before that, I did Ancestris. But I actually bred the clowns before I bred the Ancestris, which most people do common Ancestris. And then I went on to L397 and Picoltia compta, the leopard frog pleco. And since that time, I've also done the butterfly pleco, Decasaria picta, which is also known as LO52. That's the color variety I have. I've been working with some other species as well. I might be forgetting several of the Hypancistris, the L260s, Debilitera, and L201. Those are 3 of the Hypancistris I bred. I'm probably forgetting something. I really would really like to breed. I've got Baryancistris begini that I've been working with for several years, but they haven't spawned for me yet. That's the blue pinac. Beautiful fish. It's almost black in the body, but then it's got like a baby blue trim to its fins. Mm-hmm. And I'd really also like to breed rubber lip plecos, but I have the hardest time keeping them alive. I had a tank I set up just for them, but I put the butterflies in them. I honestly think the butterflies beat them up. And I haven't tried rubber lips again because I don't have a spare tank sitting around for them.
So in breeding plecos, what do you think is the most important environmental quality that you can give your fish in captivity?
In my experience, and maybe I do things wrong, I'll be honest. There are certainly plenty of ways to do it. I prefer to set up tanks with relatively high temperature, relatively strong current, anywhere from relatively strong to blasting around like a tornado strong, and also really heavy on the meat side of feeding. Even clown plecos and Pinaculus often gain the reputation of being wood eaters or just, they want algae. But if you chop up some cooked shrimp or you give them live blackworms, they go bonkers for it. And so when I've had the best breeding success, it's usually on a heavily meat-fed diet with fresh veggies too. So not instead of fresh veggies, but meat-fed. One of my favorite things to do is to get live blackworms, which right now in California is really hard to do. And I'm suffering, my fish are suffering from it. But live blackworms mixed in with gently cooked or blanched Brussels sprouts. And the live worms crawl in between the leaves of the Brussels sprouts, and you put them in a glass dish or a plastic dish so the worms can't escape. And the plecos go crazy chewing through the Brussels sprouts to get to the live worms. So, but if you do that, then you got to be really big on the water changes. So when I do water changes, I'm going to do about a minimum 50% water change, sometimes 90% water change. There have been times that I've lowered the water so low the fish are laying sideways at the bottom of the tank, not with plecos, but cichlids, for example, tetras, because the water's just not deep enough for them to sit upright. So those are the ways I approach it.
But, you know, many of our audience doesn't know, you know, you've worked physiology in your research and things, you know, that extra boost of protein, do you think it's that important to them in their egg production, possibly?
I do. I think, and see the other thing, and if people have seen my talk on breeding catfish, when I've gone around to clubs and given it, one of the things I also tell people is I kind of boom and bust their food. So sometimes I'll go a whole week without feeding them, usually on purpose, once in a while on accident. And if I travel, I will let the fish go ignored for up to 3 weeks without feeding them. If I think I'm going to be gone any longer than that with adults, I may have someone feed once, but I actually am more worried about having somebody feed my fish for me and overfeed them and not be aware of the warning signs. So I'd rather underfeed the fish than overfeed them in that situation. And then when I come back, I hit them with a big water change. I give them some meaty foods 2 or 3 days in a row, sometimes twice a day for 2 or 3 days. And then another water change to clean that water back up after all the ammonia waste is coming off the meat digestion. And then usually we get some kind of spawn out of it.
Yeah, you know, one thing I mentioned today on a live stream is that, you know, a lot of people want to feed their fish 2 or 3 times a day, but in the wild, it's boom or bust.
Yeah.
You know, if they find a food item, they'll eat it till they almost explode because they may not eat for another 3 or 4 days.
Right.
I think, especially with wild fish, it gets them more into a natural situation to not feed heavily every day, or, you know, to go without food for a week. It's, you know, the worst thing to do is if you know you're going to be gone for a week, have someone feed who's never fed your fish, and you come back to, you know, a toilet bowl full of junk because everything's died because they just fed way too much.
Right.
Yeah. And so I know you have lots of oak leaves there on your campus at certain times of the year. I've collected oak leaves on your campus. So do you think the low pH is helping you in your endeavors of breeding your plecos?
I think in some cases, definitely. So I keep fish in 2 locations. I keep fish at home and I keep fish at work. Now at home, I just have tap water. I don't try and do RO or add distilled water at home. I used to, and I just gave up on it. I didn't find it made a difference for fish that are adapted to it. So what I'm saying there is that I think if the fish get used to your tap water, you don't have to, in some cases, not all, but in some cases, you don't have to cater to that really, really soft water. Now, there are some fish that I believe do need that soft water, and you just have to get to know your fish and what they need. But if they don't, they don't. At work, however, I have the luxury of laboratory generated RO water. And so I mix that into my tanks, try and bring it down to about a half and half ratio of tap and RO. And I do use a lot of wood, especially manzanita and oak wood. The manzanita can have the bark on it, which is a really papery, thin bark. But with the oak, I prefer it without the bark on it. So we get a lot of tannins off that. But I also will put piles of oak leaves in some of the tanks, and that generates a lot of tannins too. The only thing with oak leaves, any leaf, you really got to watch as they disintegrate. They can be pulled into filter entrances and clog them. But I think that will definitely drive down your pH. I think the one tank that really bothers me in a good way, I don't understand why its pH drives down. I have a tank with almost no wood in it, and its pH will start at 7.0 or 7.5. And after about 2 weeks, it drops down to about 4. and that's where my butterfly plecos are, and they breed not frequently but regularly. I've had 2 spawns since Christmas of this year, but there was a time when they were breeding about every other week, and so they seem to really like that low pH. And in fact, I don't know if the pH being low is more important for the spawn of the adults or for the eggs hatching later. I think the low pH softens the egg jelly and helps them hatch later on. That's my idea anyway.
Yep. So there's a question already from Benjamin Peters. Do you have a good alternative for live blackworms since they're so hard to find? Even though I saw that a store in San Francisco had like 10 or 20 bags of 1 ounce packages of live blackworms. So it was first come, first serve. So maybe that means they're going to start coming around.
I think in the Bay Area and also around Sacramento, there is an individual, unfortunately his name is escaping me, who's been breeding his own and selling them. And I don't know if he's getting them from outside sources or just running his own colonies. He's actually shared online how to like cultivate your own blackworms. Mm-hmm. And he uses empty cat litter box, the pails of mm-hmm. cat litter. He uses them emptied. And I've wanted to try and cultivate them myself just to see if I could, because I go through when they were available, I'd go through over £1 a week if I could get that much, and unfortunately for now they're so expensive I don't even try. So to answer the question, I don't have a good alternative. I've fallen back on frozen hikari bloodworms, not as good, and my number one complaint there is, well, twofold. One, I think moving live food is more attractive to the plecos or any catfish than dead food is. And second of all, if the fish don't eat dead food, it rots. If the fish don't eat your live blackworms, they're aquatic worms, so they'll just go in the substrate and hide and be alive. They'll make their own waste, but they won't rot in the substrate. And in fact, they might breed at a very low rate, not enough to maintain themselves, but it means you can put too many live blackworms in an aquarium and walk away for a few days. And again, you don't have to feed the fish, because if the fish are hungry, they can dig for worms. So I really do prefer the live worms over the frozen bloodworms. But right now, in fact, I just bought 16 ounces of bloodworms today as a substitute. And that's what I've been using with my whiptails that have been breeding pretty well. And I just got a spawn a couple of weeks ago from the marbled talking catfish, a doratid, Amblydoris nauticus, which is pretty exciting to me to have done that. And they're feeding on these frozen bloodworms too.
I've tried in my pleco tanks earthworms, mm-hmm. Red wigglers, and they don't seem to touch them at all. I can put 3 or 4 in there, even like my Queen Arabesque. I'll do a water change, a big water change, and there are the earthworms tucked underneath the wood in there. So I think it's the small, blackworm, tiny blackworm type that they're really going after, because they just won't even go after small redworms. So yeah,
have you tried chopping up those redworms?
Yeah, but then you still get that same problem that, if they don't eat it, they'll die. Yeah, that stuff dies and it rots, and it's hard when you have wood in a tank to get it, to see, to notice something in between the pieces of wood.
Yeah. The other meat that I found that works pretty well, actually, I like using this too, is I buy human grade white leg shrimp at my local grocery store. The size of the shrimp doesn't matter, because I'll cook it just long enough to make it change color from that like uncooked pink to the cooked white color. And then I'll deshell them, I'll remove the exoskeleton, and I'll mince it up into really fine little bits of meat. And I have not met a pleco that doesn't like that.
Okay. I wonder if they'll do the same with the little cocktail shrimp that you can buy that have been already pre-cooked.
Yeah, probably. I haven't tried them. And again, I even those I would probably chop up. In my experience, with whole shrimp, what'll happen is one pleco will set upon that shrimp and start eating it. And because that pleco has it, no one else is eating it. And then when they're done, if someone else doesn't jump right on it and eat it, it may drift under a rock or get in a crevice, and then it just rots in there. But
Yeah.
if you chop it up into tiny bits and you throw it in all at once, everybody can find a piece to chew on. And if the pieces do, if they're tiny pieces and they do drift away, they will rot and decompose, but they're so tiny they won't make that big gunky mess of rotten meat that a whole shrimp would do.
Yeah. 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 Because you have to, everybody's been, scrambling around trying to find live blackworms. And, since COVID, it's just, I think COVID hit the blackworm farm really hard in Central California for some reason.
Yeah. I think I don't know the true story, but I've been told it's everything from because we had some problems a couple of years ago and then it got better and then it got worse again. And a couple of years ago, it was the drought and the fires.
Yeah.
And this year it was the flooding and the rain.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether both have been causes for different reasons or what, but just devastated.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've done plecos, really very prolific in your pleco breeding.
Yep.
And you did mention your Farluellas, the Laura Carids,
not Farluellas, but whiptails.
Whiptail.
Farluellas are big cats.
I'm not a catfish taxonomist, so I lump them all together into the Farluella group. So.
I've never kept Farluet, although I'll tell you this, my local pet store, a Carter's in Stockton, gets Farluellas in on a regular basis, and they're like mostly adult, but certainly not full grown. They're about 8 inches long, right? But Farluellas get bigger. And they get, when they arrive, there's usually 2 different species mixed together in the shipment. And you can tell the difference if you see them up against the glass and you look at their belly. One species, the plates of armor on the abdomen, they'll have a left and a right plate, and they'll have a zigzagging seam right down the center of their belly. The other species will have 3 rows of plates. So there's a left and a right plate, and then there's a middle plate going down the center. And so if you're going to get Farluella, you want to make sure that you are not mixing in the species. I don't know if they would hybridize, but I wouldn't want to take that chance. And I'm kind of chomping at the bit to get some, but again, tank space wise, I'm hesitant. But right now I have several species of whiptail. I've been breeding the common whiptail, Rhinoloricaria eigenmanni, for several years. They started breeding during COVID, and right now I have 2 males on eggs today. For about the last 5 days. They're going to hatch at any time. And I have 2 breeder boxes hanging on the tank with 2 different sets of babies of different ages. And then I have another tank with Rhinoloricaria lanceolata, which came from Arkoff, or from the rivers around the Rio Itaia. And they were collected, some by me, some by Chris and Fernando and Carlos and others. There, and they are just a beautiful species, and they've been breeding too. They've bred about 4 times for me. And then just recently I purchased what I thought was 1 species of whiptail, and it turned out to be 2 mixed in a shipment. So I couldn't be happier. I got them from Freshwater Exotics, and they were supposed to be Rhinoloricaria teffiana. And the company sent me a picture of the fish, and I realized it was a totally different, unrelated whiptail. And it was one of the ones that it's Limula ticthes, if I'm saying that right. It's one of the ones that forms a big veil with its lips when it's dragging eggs around. And it's actually one of the species we caught also down outside of Arkoff. And then mixed in that shipment when I bought them turned out to be 2 Rhinoloricaria malini, which are my bucket list of whiptails. They are the most beautiful Rhinoloricaria in my opinion. I only have 2. They're not sexually mature. I'm just praying it's male and female. I don't know if I'll ever get more, but they are gorgeous, and I'm hoping for the best for both of those. I've only had them a week and a half. And
do you breed them like you breed your plecos? I mean, do nothing special to them to get your green eggs and ham?
So the Rhinoloricaria eigenmanni do make green eggs. The lanceolata make sort of a yellow amber colored egg. And I've read other reports where lanceolata make green eggs. Now, lanceolata is a really widespread species, so it's quite possible that there are kind of cryptic species amongst the fish that look like lanceolata. So that may be true. But I do basically treat them. The big difference between them and plecos, in my experience, is most whiptails that I've gotten spawns out of those two species want to be in an open-ended pipe, not in a closed cave. I had one male Eigenmanni who went through a period where he'd go into a closed cave over and over again, but he did that only for about 3 spawns, 4 spawns, and then he stopped. And now he only goes in bamboo pipes, and he continues to breed. The lanceolata are only in bamboo pipes. They don't even go in caves. And so that's my go-to for the lanceolata. I get the pipes. Bamboo works well. I have a couple of clay ones from Pleco Caves, but I've just got those recently. I haven't even put them in the tanks yet.
You know, I had some breed in my big tank behind me. And, you know, I found the green eggs, and they were actually laid on some of the wood, on the outside of some of the wood. And that really surprised me, thinking that, you know, most of what I know, they're going to breed in some kind of cave or a hollow of some sort.
Well, that sounds like your Farlowella did that. Farlowella, and also I think Sturasoma or Sturasoma tichthes, the royal Farlowellas and the Farlowellas, they tend to breed on surfaces. So they might breed on a log. They might breed on the glass. They might breed on there's an acquaintance of mine on Planet Catfish. She's been having great luck with her royal Farlowellas. And I think they're royals in hers. They might be regular Farlowellas of hers, but they're laying eggs on the upright exhaust pipe of an undergravel filter, like on a regular basis. So yeah, they will do that. They don't need a pipe or a cave. I see a question in the chat. How big are the bamboo? What I do is I look for bamboo that's about 1.5 inches diameter to 1 3/4 inches diameter. Don't go any bigger than that. I know it might seem like 1.5 inches and 2 inches are similar, but that slight difference in diameter makes a huge difference in cross-sectional area of the pipe. Do not go so big. I don't recommend that. So 1 1/4 to 1 3/4 inch diameter. I buy like an 8-foot pole and cut it into lengths. And if you leave the little joints in the bamboo, you're going to get a closed cave. If you don't include the joint, you're going to get an open pipe. And I cut them about I actually cut them about 6 inches long. And I do that because the largest breeder boxes from Fluval are 10 inches. So if a male spawns in that pipe, I can lift the whole pipe with the male and the eggs in it and drop the whole thing in the breeder box and let the babies hatch in the breeder box so I can raise them up.
And you'll leave the male with the babies, with the eggs at that time?
I will leave the male with I've never had luck taking whiptail dads away from their eggs and getting the eggs to hatch. I haven't tried it too often because I haven't had luck the times I have. So now I just leave the dad with the eggs. And then as soon as the eggs hatch, I lift dad and the tube out of the breeder box and put it back in the aquarium. And then I start feeding the babies in the breeder box. Somebody, I don't remember who it was, it might have been Charlie Mueller, told me that you've got to drop the food right on their head. So my first foods for whiptail babies is live microworms. And in those breeder boxes that are outside the tank, the hang-on ones, they have a solid wall. So the food isn't falling through. Yeah. I do use some net baskets, but the worms will slip through the floor and then the babies starve.
So we have a question about any new L397 spawns.
I just had a 397 spawn about 2 weeks ago. And then I have some that are about a month old. I'm raising them up. They're not quite big enough to sell. I plan to distribute some of them down to Tropical Haven, a pet store in Modesto, where I take a lot of my fish. I'm sensing there might be people in Southern California who are looking for some. I have that indication. I see a question about fresh bamboo. I would use fresh bamboo if I could get it. I have bought my bamboo before at the I bought my bamboo at the local hardware store or garden center, and it looks like it has a varnish coat on it, but I don't think it is. I think that's just the natural cured appearance of the bamboo. And it's dry, brown, and you don't even have to worry if you buy it dried out, if it has a split along the length of it, as long as it doesn't have 2 splits. Because when that bamboo pipe cracks open, so it looks like you ruined your cave, and then you put that bamboo back into water, the bamboo will swell and it'll seal that crack. It won't fuse it, but it'll close it. So it still behaves like a bamboo cave.
And please note, when you first put bamboo, it's going to float, but it will sink finally, and it's going to fungus up big time.
Yeah, it will do that. I have tried boiling my bamboo to accelerate its sinking. I don't see any harm in it, but sometimes I literally just cut it and throw it in the tank and let it take its dear sweet time.
Yeah. I brought a bunch of bamboo home from Peru, and it works great, but you need it to, you need a while for it to sink for sure.
Yeah. Now, one thing I'll say about, you mentioned the fungus. I'm not sure if it's actually fungus or not.
Oh, yeah.
There's when I have the dry bamboo and I put it in the tank, even if I boil it, it'll be in there for a couple of weeks, and then some really nasty, stinky white stuff appears inside the bamboo. And I think what that is like the inner lining of the bamboo tissue, like delaminating, like separating away.
Okay.
So I just lift the cave out, dump it out, flush it with tap water, and throw it back in the tank, and I'm done. Yeah. It doesn't ever come back. So I think it's a delaminated inner lining. I don't think it's like a mold that's going to grow and make things bad.
Well, I find the fish will munch on it anyway.
Yeah. And I like caves. And if people have heard my talks, they know I endorse Pleco Caves. Pleco Caves endorses me. If you use my name Beckatine in a sale, you get 15% off your sale. Get over $75 in the USA, you get free shipping. Shameless plug for Pleco Caves. But I also got to say, there's nothing wrong with mixing up. I believe a lot of variety in caves. So I buy several different shapes and sizes of clay caves from Pleco Caves. I have a few slate caves that I think are good too. It's a different shape. And then bamboo. And the good thing about bamboo is the babies can chew on it on the inside. So it like provides a food source for those newly hatched babies, where no clay, no slate, nothing else is going to provide that, because they're not natural, like, organic material stuff.
Okay. I'm going to probably have to kick Alexander Williamson out of the live stream, because he likes to use the word Corridora a lot, and he knows that is one of my
Alex
pet peeves, is the Corridora.
Well, so, we know how to get your goat, at least.
Yeah, that's
how to get your goatee. Let's put it that way.
Two words get me. First word is Corridora, and the second word is species without.
Oh yeah, my favorite species is.
Yeah. That gets me too. I'm sorry, I'm not very tolerant of things like that. So let's talk about my favorite group of catfish in the Amazon.
What is that?
Well, come on, you know what those are. Those the tatia, the wood cats.
Oh yeah, the tatia. Oh, I like my wood cats.
So talk to us about your wood cats. Yeah, well, have you ever bred trichomicties?
Tetranematichthys. No, I have not.
Okay.
In fact, I had some. We brought them back from Peru. They were caught there in the Rio Nanay. What a cool fish. They did not do well in my tank, and I think the answer was I see another version of Corridora there. I think that I could not find the right food for them, or I had them in a tank with Batroca glanus, the larger bumblebee catfish, and it could just be that the Batroca glanus was too competitive for food, and the Tetranematichthys is much more timid. So currently, the wood cats I have what are called midnight wood cats, Zamora wood cats. They're Ochinipteryctes corcoideus. They're at my house. They've bred a few times. They're an egg scatterer. I've had oil cats before, the Perugiae, and they're a cave spawner. They're the only wood cat I've had that's a cave spawner, and it's the female that guards the eggs, compared to plecos or the whiptails, where the male guards the eggs. And then currently I have Tatia intermedia, which I'm waiting for them to spawn, and they haven't. And I have some Spinipterus mojiri, the Otorongo woodcat. They've never spawned for me. And then I have one lonely female Tatia gyrina. And I'll be in Pittsburgh in about a week from now. and somebody's breeding them there, and I'm hoping to buy some extra Tatia gyrina there so I can bring some back and try and breed them too.
So you said that Persier is the only woodcat that actually is a cave spawner. So are the other ones egg scatterers, or what do they do?
Well, it's the only cave spawning woodcat I've kept. I won't say it's the only cave spawning woodcat. It's the only one that I've kept that spawns in a cave. It's the only one actually I've seen anyone say spawns in a cave. It's really kind of weird in that regard. Jeremy Bash would be the person to ask about woodcats in terms of more varieties. But they're, those are tiny fish. So the caves that I use with them, those are like a 3/4 inch diameter cave, or a 1 inch diameter is all they need. The other woodcats I bred are all egg scatterers, and they just blast them around the tank. And the Zamora cats, they're in a tank that's a 36-gallon bow front, an Aquion 36-gallon bow front, and it's a pretty tall tank. I don't like tall tanks because my arms are short, and I spent hours with a turkey baster sucking up individual eggs to collect about 100+ eggs off the floor of the tank, just scattered throughout the tank. They're tiny eggs, but they have big jelly coats, and you just got to look for that little dot of golden yellow yolk in the center of the jelly coat, and that's how you spot them.
So Alexander says his favorite is
the ninjas,
the orcas, or Tatia, or
they are two species.
Yeah, Tatia mosaica, which is the false orca, and then the real orcas. They're actually two different species because one's from Brazil, one's from Peru.
Different river systems, and there's subtle difference in their color. You look, the orcas tend to have more white on them, especially at the base of the caudal fin, on the peduncle. And they're both gorgeous, though. I had some orcas. I after about 5 years, I ended up losing them, which I really regret. But I might try them again.
Yeah, I got my mosaica from the wet spot in Portland, and they're hanging in there. They're not breeding. I don't know if I need much greater current. They like the caves that I have, but some are really big and fat like females, and some are skinny like males, even when they're not eating a lot. So I don't know what I need to do with those to get those to breeding. So you have any cool ideas on that?
I would. You've got the water current going in there.
No, I don't have a big water current. That's what I'm thinking.
So I put some water current in there, have a still place for the food to collect. And mine were, so I had mine up around 35 degrees, which might have been too hot. And maybe that's why ultimately they didn't spawn and I lost them. But they were close to 35 degrees for the years that I had them.
Okay, go ahead. Wait.
35 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, we have a lot of Americans in the audience. So
and they were that might not be 35 Celsius. What it was actually, let me see. Hold on a second.
37 degrees Celsius is 98.6. So
yeah, so yeah, they weren't that high. They were about, what's 33 Celsius? Is that 80 what?
About 84, I think.
Okay, so 33, 34, 35 Celsius is where I had them.
Okay.
So yeah, 33, 34. So they were in like the mid 80s, 86, maybe 87 at the top. I'll tell you what, and I would go again, your frozen food, if they're shy. So some woodcats are shy. You throw food in and they won't come out. In fact, my bumblebee catfish, which I'm also really going nuts trying to spawn unsuccessfully so far. If I throw those frozen bloodworms in the tank, they will literally be a 1/4 inch away from that bloodworm. They're hiding in a bamboo tube, and they will not come out and get that bloodworm because I might see them, right? They will literally like not take it. But the Tatia intermedia, you throw it doesn't matter if it's broad daylight, you throw some frozen bloodworms in there and they just go ballistic, dashing all around the tank. So different woodcats have different personalities. You may have to feed your orcas at night or your mosaica at night. Yeah, definitely give them some rich food, kind of pump it up. And then when I do, like I said, big water changes, and I change with mostly cold water. So if I have a tank at 85 degrees Fahrenheit and I do a water change that's like 75%, I'm changing with cold tap water, and that aquarium will fall from 85 down to about 70 or maybe even 69. And then I just let the aquarium heater bring it back up to temperature over a period of hours.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't, if you're not sure your fish can handle that, don't do it so dramatically at first. Do it more mildly initially, and then after you find out what they can handle, then be a little more extreme and see if it helps.
Yeah, that's, basically that's what I do in all my tanks, just on a regular basis, because I'm not worrying about getting hot water. Getting, most of my tanks are in the mid 80s in my fish room, and so the water is always going to be a lot colder coming in.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The one thing I'll mention, unrelated to woodcats. So you mentioned you got your fish from what, Wet Spot, you said, right?
Wet Spot, yes.
So I saw on their list they've had some little Asian catfish, which I have. You can only have so many spoons in the pot at once, right? And I've been talking to a couple of my friends, like I should get some of these Asian catfishes. They're only like 1.5 inches, 2 inches long. They're not expensive. Some of them are only like $4 each. Some of them are $8 each. I would buy a dozen of each of those, but I can't bring myself to buy more fish because I have so many fish going.
Don't you have some extra tanks hanging around?
I do, but there's a difference between having the tanks and being able to take care of the tanks. Petco had that that tank sale last month, and I bought 4 of those 60-gallon breeders. They're regularly $200. They were on sale for $100, and if you bought them online and picked up at shore, you got 15% off. So I was paying $85 a tank for these 60-gallon breeders. Incredible price for a 60-gallon breeder. Mm-hmm. It's a 4-foot tank. It's the same footprint as a 75, just not as tall. So my short arms can find the bottom.
But I don't see any in your office, though.
I have one in my greenhouse. It's the only 60-gallon I've actually filled up. It's in my greenhouse with baby Rhinoloricaria and Decusaria growing out in it.
But you need something in your office. That's what I'm saying.
So I have an empty 33-gallon long sitting in the next room that's supposed to be sitting behind me in my desk. But I made a promise to my wife I would not set up another tank in my lab until I finish cleaning my office. I'm going to keep that promise.
That's what graduate students are for.
I should tell them that.
Yeah. Especially ones from my university that we send over there.
Yeah.
So Alex wants to know, do woodcats eat lignin and cellulose like some of the ancestors do? I don't think they do, because
woodcats are strictly
carnivores.
Either they're carnivores or at least scavengers. Yeah. Like they will pick at dead fish if you leave them in there, but you shouldn't. Yeah. But they are really, I mean, the thing I like the most about the Tatia and even the little Perugiae, they are like underwater motorboats. Yeah. When they come out to feed, they skim the water surface, just flying as fast as they can back and forth across the tank like bullets. I mean, there's no fish I know that acts like that at feeding time. And if the food is floating, they're all up, because what they would normally be doing is eating bugs on the water surface.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff Kane. Yes, I need to clean my office.
That's why I don't live stream from my office. It's you don't want to see my office. It's not that bad.
It's a little messy. It's a little messy.
Maybe I have things on my floor even, stacked up all over the place.
Yeah, there's stuff there.
Yeah, when I had Perugia, I would feed freeze-dried bloodworms, and they only float on the surface and they go crazy. And it's in the wild they eat mosquito larvae primarily.
Right.
So is the red lizard a domestic creation? Yes, it is, I believe, because I did do some genetic work on them, and they came out to be just the normal. What's the ones that derive from?
Rhinoloricaria lanceolata.
Yeah, it's a lanceolata. It's just that it came out to be 100% lanceolata. So it's just it's either been captive bred, it's been what's the term I want to use? It's,
Line bred for a
yeah,
color.
it's been line bred, selectively bred for that color, or it was just a color morph that appeared spontaneously sometime, and they line bred it from there. But it is just a lanceolata that is red.
Well, of course, there's a little controversy over that. They may come out genetically screening as lanceolata. The other story that runs around is that the original fish, the first fish to show up, was actually a wild export, maybe not lanceolata, and it was a really kind of poor breed. It was hard to breed. It didn't have many babies, and so people hybridized them with lanceolata to kind of increase the fecundity of spawns and make it easier to spawn. And they introduced that lanceolata genetics. And there have been probably multiple times where people thought they had red lizards and they actually just had, washed out lanceolata. So it could be that what we get in the hobby is lanceolata today, color line bred. But I don't know if that's the original fish from back when they first came in the hobby.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just think that's what now maybe there's still some original lines in Europe or something, but in the United States, everything looks like an orange version of lanceolata.
It's not a really red fish anymore, at least the ones I see in the pet stores around me here in Orange County. It's more of a brownish, a brick brownish color. It's not a nice red color like you see in some of the photos of them.
Right. And the color is really highly sensitive to substrate.
Yeah.
So I've seen some that go from red. I actually had some for a while and they were red when I got them and they turned brown as they aged. So, I mean, I think they're kind of like the color morphs of the Ancestris where you have the super reds. And there are some people have some stunning super red Ancestris, but most people have, I think people who are breeding fish, and I would say this is true of me too. If a fish breeds, I don't want to go killing off a bunch of babies if I don't think they're optimal. Yeah. And if someone's willing to take them, I won't charge much, but I might still let someone have them, and hopefully they don't rebreed them. Yeah. But I think that people who, there's an economic incentive. I won't say people do it, but there's an economic incentive not to cull. And you don't know how good they're going to be until they grow up. So you can't even know what to cull when they're little. So not surprisingly, there's a lot of irregularity in the quality of super red Ancestris too.
Yep. So on another subject, something you taught me last week when you were here giving your talk at our club, tell us a story of albino, albino Ancestris, why sometimes even though you breed two albinos together, you don't get albinos.
Okay, so it appears that there are at least, so understand that when an animal is albino, what it means is that it has some genetic defect that is preventing it from manufacturing pigment melanin, the pigment melanin, right? Or, and there are, of course, different kinds of albinos. You could be, because there are actually different color forming cells in fish. There's the melanophores or melanos, I think fish have melanophores, not melanocytes. But it's one or the other. And then there's other cells like xanthophores and iridophores. That's true in frogs. I believe it's true in fish. Yeah. So, when you're talking about albinos, you're usually talking about melanin issues. And so you could have any mutation that destroys the gene, any of the genes involved in melanin production is going to knock out melanin production. And if those mutations are what they call recessive, and so you have a pure breeding albino line, that means that both of the parents have that same mutation, especially if they came from a sibling family, and you're going to get albino babies. But since there can be multiple different, at least two different known mutations for albinos, both of them are recessive. But if you have a parent with one mutation, that means the other gene, and it's the other gene they have is a normal gene, and the other parent has a different mutation, so their opposite gene is a normal gene. When they breed together, the babies are heterozygous for the two sets of albino genes, which means they are not homozygous recessive for either one, and you end up with brown babies that are carrying the albino gene. So those babies may go on to give albino babies, but none of those first generation babies are going to be albino.
Yeah, because I couldn't figure out why my albino group doesn't give albino babies. I get the normal spotted babies that come out when they're babies. So
are you feeding them albino food?
I'm feeding them albino green beans.
There you go. That's the thing. See,
what are albino green beans called?
White beans?
Wax beans.
Ah.
No, I just feed them plain old French cut green beans. No salt green beans. So
just so no one takes me seriously, I am not saying that albino food is necessary. I don't want to risk my reputation.
Yes, he is. Albino food, all white food is bad food.
Yeah.
Just so you know, you can see in the banner for those who want to prescribe to Eric's YouTube channel, subscribe to it. That's his YouTube channel, Beckteen #1.
Yeah.
And so that's where he has all his videos of his catfish breeding, so you can see what he does, how he does it, who he does it with. So any other of your catfish that we haven't mentioned that you breed that you think it's out of the ordinary?
So I've had some good experiences with two other, besides the Dorad. I think the Doradids is my newest one that is really not commonly bred, and but the oldest baby is only 2 weeks old. I feel like I got to get further along before I say I know what I'm doing with them. But I've had luck in the past with banjo catfish, the common banjo catfish, and they are an egg scatterer, but they do this weird thing where the couple will come together at the bottom of the tank and swim up through the water column, and then the female will roll upside down and shoot her eggs up into the water like a volcano exploding. That is a pretty, and I saw them doing it at like 5 a.m. once. I happened to be up early and I caught them spawning. Otherwise, I would have never known that's what they were doing. But man, that's amazing. And I've also had luck with Microcynodontis, a small catfish from the Congo. And I've only gotten one spawn out of them and only have one baby to show for it. But maybe I still have the parents after all these years, and maybe they'll do it again.
So your common banjos, how big were the adults when they bred for you?
With tail, probably about 4 inches.
Okay.
They're easy enough to sex because the females will be hugely rotund and the males will be skinny.
In their head region, and the head abdomen region.
Yeah, no, the females are definitely larger, so the head's going to be bigger because the body's bigger. But it's the body is just this rotund. They look like they're going to burst when they're well fed.
Okay.
And males do not get that large. And they were in the 36-gallon Beaufront, the same tank that the Achinipteryxes are in now, and they would bury themselves in the sand and they would eat live blackworms, and then at night they would come out and spawn. I think I got about 5 or 6 spawns out of them over a 2-year period, and the babies did really well with at the time I didn't have microworms, so I was just pulverizing freeze-dried tubifex for the babies at first. And then I went to live blackworms for the babies too.
So there's a question, have a pair of albino bristlenose and they get an offspring with a calico color non-albino. Can this happen?
Well, again, it could, I guess, because the genes that make for color changes in Ancestris, they're not well documented, other than we know that there are multiple variants of albino genes, and there are multiple genes that contribute to the calico color and other color types like the green dragon or whatever it's called, so, and the super red, obviously. And so if you've got a color morph that requires a double recessive gene to express that phenotype, and the parents are carriers of the gene, but they're not expressing that phenotype because they're not homozygous recessive, they're not, they're not homozygous, then you might have offspring that sometimes show up with that trait. if they're mating with the right combination of parent.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So
and citrus color is a mess. I'll just say that.
So Alexander Williamson from the Dark History Living in Your Aquarium has a question about the original L144 lemon blue eyes. And he says, is there a wild lemon, or is that story BS?
So the story, I only know what I've read, and there's a historical story about it on Planet Catfish if you want to go read it. The story is this: that originally there was one solitary fish imported from South America to Europe, a single fish that got the number L144. It was one fish. So the only way to breed it was to hybridize it with a common ancestress. And so already any babies you're getting are not actually 144 anymore. And then somehow in the early 2000s, that whole line was basically lost or died out. And so all the black or blue-eyed albino or lemon ancestress that you have today are all basically line-bred variants of common ancestress, where people have selected for those traits to recreate the appearance of L144, but none of them are truly a wild-caught L144 lineage. So I'm not saying they're not wild-caught. Obviously, they're not wild-caught, but they're not actually 144 anymore. On Planet Catfish, they call them species for lack of a better name. And not an L number, just there's randomly, this is the fourth ancestress that we don't have a name for, so they call it fish number 4.
Okay. So you have any experience breeding any bubble nest cats?
So I have experience keeping them, not breeding them. I have some Dyneema right now, and I've only had them since November. And
I know what they are, but some people may not know the scientific.
What's their common name? They're one of the hoplos.
Yeah.
Right. It's one of the hoplo cats. I forget and it's not the flagtail hoplo. It's the other one. Dyneema, the specific epithet escapes me. The non-flagtail one. I've got them out in the greenhouse in a 75-gallon tank. And what I've done is I've put some pothos in the tank to let the roots create a mishmash of plant matter at the water surface. And I'm hoping they'll bubble nest in the roots. But again, I've only had them, actually, I only put them in the greenhouse maybe a month ago. They haven't been out there very long. So they haven't had much time, and they're not adults yet. I can tell they're not sexually mature because they should be sexable, and I can't sex them yet. Yeah, it's one of the portholes. Yes, it's not the flagtail porthole. It's the regular porthole. Thank you, Alex. Exactly. And so that's what I'm hoping for. We'll see what we get out of it. But they're immature, so it'll be a while. Hopefully they'll do well.
Okay. In the final couple minutes, anybody else have any questions they want to ask of Dr. Eric? Or any closing thoughts you have on catfish? What's your bucket list catfish that you want to breed?
Well, it's got to be microglanus. It shouldn't be hard. People have done it. I've got at least 3 species. Currently, I've got something that may be Pocillus, or it's AF Pocillus. It's again from Peru, caught by myself and Fernando and Chris and Leo and Carlos around Arcov and in other parts of Peru. And then I've also got the common bumblebee that's sold at most pet stores. That's a Colombian variant. And that's sold as Iheringi, which is also an incorrect ID, but there's at least two species mixed in that group too. And by golly, none of them have given me eggs yet.
Okay.
So a little frustration on my part, but I'm working on. And then now this Rhinoloricaria malini, which was a bucket list to get. I don't even know if I have a pair yet. So I have 2, but that's something I'd like to breed for sure.
Okay. So Alishon, no breeding bubble nest cats. He answered
I'm working on it, but not.
The portholes, probably the closest he's going to get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen we found bubble nests in the wild there outside of Arkoff that day, but and we could have collected those big males, but I did not want to disturb a father on his nest in the wild, so I let them be.
So Alishon been breeding Ancestral species Paraguay. Any idea what it could be?
So there is a fish in the trade called Ancestral species Rio Paraguay. Now, Paraguay could be the country or the river. So if it's probably the river. And that's a gorgeous Ancestral. I actually have those too. They have the light base color is a light brown with almost a hint of orange to it. And then the darker color is a darker blackish brown with a little bit of a purple to it, in my opinion. And they are a relatively small Ancestral. I've had mine for about 4 years now, and I got them up at the Seattle Club when I spoke there a few years back. And the adults are only about 3 inches long, but man, they are stunning. And they breed for me occasionally, but they are probably my worst breeder of Ancestral species in terms of frequency. I'll be lucky if I get 1 spawn a year out of them.
Okay.
But whereas my other Ancestral, when they're breeding, will spawn every 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
Okay. Okay. I know the Paraguay, they tend to be cooler water, the ones that come from Paraguay itself.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they are an undescribed species, so there is no species identity for them.
Mm-hmm. So someone wants to know, can they contact you to get more information? So do you mind if I put your email in the chat?
Yes, people are free to contact me. My email is ethomas@pacific.edu.
So I just posted it there.
All right. And people can reach out to me.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, boys and girls.
I will say this. I do get, not related to people asking fish questions, but just as part of work, I probably get 150 plus emails a day. So if I don't answer instantly, there's a risk that an email might get buried. So please feel free emailing again. You're not going to bother me if you have to email twice.
Yeah, I have to email him 10 times before he gets back to me. And, I know the guy. So what can I say?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. Thank you for coming. Please note that there is a Fish Fam auction tonight on Skipper's channel. Skipper, if you're still here, if you want to put that in the chat, be my guest. He may not be here.
And Findig, June 3rd and 4th in Sacramento.
Yeah, Findig, June 3rd and 4th. Go there, meet my wife. I will be in Peru already, so I may check in on via, WhatsApp once in a while to see how she's doing that day. So I'll be back normally on my normal Wednesday live stream, and I'll probably keep up a Saturday live stream from now on. We may have a new live stream coming up on Saturday with a group of people. So with that, thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Eric, for being here today and answering our questions on catfish.
This was fun.
The favorite fish in the world. So there is the Fish Fam auction at 8 p.m. That is 8 p.m. Eastern time, correct, Skipper? Yes, no? 8 p.m., that's 5 p.m. California time. And I will have 2 fish on the Fish Fam auction tonight. 1 undescribed species and 1 not very common species. So with that, do your water changes, hug your families. Thank you very much, Eric, for showing up today. I know it was last minute, but I truly appreciate it.
Say hi to family.
Bye, everybody.